Hey everybody, it's Dwight. I'm doing a book giveaway. Temple Grandin's The Autistic Brain is a great work about autism, and that's what we're talking about today, largely. The first 5 people who tweet a link to this episode will get a paperback copy of Temple Grandin's The Autistic Brain. At BreakerBrain on Twitter is where you will find a tweet with that link. Retweet it or do your own tweet sharing the link. Make sure to @ me so I know you did it. Also, Sydney was kind enough to hang around after the interview to do a couple of questions and answers for our Patreon subscribers, where she talked about the do's and don'ts of working with neurodiverse people in your life if you are neurotypical. So if you're interested in that, go on over to patreon.com/brokenbrain and subscribe today. The Broken Brain. Sydney, welcome, and welcome to everybody who's listening, all you brainiacs out there tuning back into the Broken Brain. I'm here with Sydney Aronin, and we got in contact through, I don't remember. I think it was one of the Facebook groups, right?
Podcasting group, I think.
Yeah.
Podcasting network kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Podcasting network for podcasting podcasters or whatever. They all have different names in these groups, but they all involve. They all
the
involve
same thing in the end.
Yeah, exactly. Helpful places where podcasters hang out. If you are one, you should join whichever group we met in, and none others. No, I'm just kidding. But I saw you were posting about a podcast that you're starting up, and it sounds fascinating. We're going to be talking about that and about the basic topic today of basically neurodiversity.
Yes.
And how that works. We were just comparing notes. And if you're comfortable, we'll find. Obviously, you're starting a podcast about it, so you probably are. We were comparing diagnoses. I'm diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I have tested positively for ADHD as well on one of those. It's like one of those computer tests. You ever take that where it's click when you see the symbol on the top of the screen, but not other times or whatever.
I hated that. That felt like torture.
Yeah.
I was like that Eric Andre meme in the testing room of just let me out. Let me out.
I had and this is probably a diagnostic indicator too. I had this thought pop in my head while I was taking the test. I was like, what if I blinked and for some reason my blinking synced up with the little mark that appears on the screen? Then I wouldn't click the whole time and I'd just be like, well, gee, nothing ever appeared. And that thought, as stupid as it is, made me start laughing. And so the whole time there's an observer watching me, this nurse or whatever is watching me, and I'm like, click, 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 whoops, click, damn, oh, click. And so I don't know what the notes look like. But anyway. So what's your claim to neurodiversity? Oh, as far as diagnostics, what would we want to share with people?
Yeah, so I have ADHD and I'm autistic. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 13, and I actually didn't get an autism diagnosis until I was 21, so about 2 years ago.
Okay. So that's a fairly new.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm one of those too. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder as an adult, and not only as an adult, but as a psychotherapist.
Wow.
Because of stuff that I was going through, I went in and actually did the responsible thing that I would have advocated any of my clients do. And I was diagnosed, and it was one of those, when I heard it, I was like, really? What? I hadn't recognized it in myself. What was that like for you, being diagnosed later as an adult?
It was a big relief, honestly. It gave me a lot of answers, kind of, looking back over childhood, everything kind of started to click and make sense. And I didn't feel like that alone anymore. So that wish I could have gotten it sooner, but better late than never, I guess.
Oh, it's great. I find it's very helpful to know more about yourself just anyway.
Yes, definitely.
But I also had the experience. It was funny for me, even being a therapist and very diagnosis positive or whatever. I was not expecting it. I was expecting some anxiety, ADHD.
Yeah.
And when I got it, it was like, huh? For like, and it seriously was like half a second to 3 seconds maybe. And then I was like, okay.
Yeah.
This is super useful. And with mine comes the added benefit that there is an automatic medication benefit for
Yeah.
balancing moods. And, um, but anyway, so yeah, that's being able to incorporate that then into your life. Did you find that that gave you any, did it make any difference in how you approached your life?
Oh, definitely. Um, I think the biggest thing was I was a lot easier on myself, with in a lot of social situations, not a stranger to faux pas and things like that. So I kind of stopped feeling so awful about it and started, there's this reason why I do make these faux pas. There's this reason why I'm kind of awkward, and it's not, I'm not bad because of it. I'm not, it made me feel, like I had a better understanding of myself, and that kind of helped me,
Yeah.
go throughout these things. And I think I was able to, make better connections because of it, because I didn't kind of freak out and back away from it. I kind of accepted it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's excellent. I mean, embracing and accepting things is always more helpful than being in denial. That's the big secret I'm dropping out there today for anyone who didn't know that. Denial, bad, against it.
Yeah.
So it's a radical position.
Hot take.
I don't want to piss people off out there, but denial's bad. For me, it also helped that I had some people in my family who were diagnosed or had shown experiences with that, and there's some family history of some issues that maybe were undiagnosed because it was back far enough that that people just didn't go to the doctor about certain things, right? And that actually helped to put it in perspective too, because I knew that I could call up, and ask questions and talk about it and talk about what I was doing, for treatment and things. And yeah, and one of the things that I thought might be interesting to talk about is kind of ways in which society isn't planned and built for people. It's built by NTs. That's neurotypicals. I like to call them that. I like to no, but I think it sometimes is helpful for me to have a conception of that. To say people who are neurotypical are the ones who design things, and I guess it makes sense because majority or whatever. They set up the schools, they set up the businesses, the courts, the everything, and it's designed for people who have the neurotypicality. Is that a word?
I'm going with that. Yeah.
Right. Feel free to use that if you're looking for a title. No, I'm just kidding. What is your show going to be called? We'll probably get into that later, but I was just curious.
The title right now, it's in progress, is like how neurotypical, but the neuro would be in parentheses, kind of a play on like, oh, how typical.
Oh, nice. I like that.
Yeah, I had someone reach out and they were like, don't change the title. I like that title. So I might
like it too.
End up keeping it, but
I'm going to vote for that too. So put me down in that column. If you have pre-listener voting, because I'm definitely on the pre-listener list.
Put it in the hat.
But I was thinking about the way it's designed, society in general. And I'm curious your thoughts about that, and we can talk about it a little bit. What do you think about the way we fit?
Yes, I definitely agree. This world was not built with not only us not in mind, but with a lot of people not in mind, I think. And I think that we don't really have to, tear it down and build it back up. But I do think that we can each add something into this world to kind of help for the next generation of neurodiverse people, to help them feel, more included and more accepting of themselves. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. And I think that's the nice thing about it,
Yeah, shame plays a big role in the way people act, right?
Definitely.
Particularly without diagnosis and without information, right? It's just like, because without a diagnosis, it's easy to just be like, oh, you're weird. That's how people maybe treat. Or you're unreliable, like someone who has mood cycling, for example. And sometimes even if people are nice, I would always do that to myself. Be like, I go through these periods where I don't call people back on the phone. And, and if they can't receive a text, it's just, I guess we won't talk. And when you're running your own business, that's not good. And people, or when you're working in an agency where you have to fill out reports, that's not good, um, to not follow through. And there's a morality expectation to put on certain
Yeah.
things, right? Do you find that people you run into, so because social things you probably deal with, right? People have a
Oh yeah,
expectation of that. Yeah.
definitely. I think it's it's different for autism anyways because I'm a woman and it's seen a lot differently in women. A lot of the research and things were done on men who are on the spectrum. So I've run into a lot of, but you don't look autistic. And it's like, but you don't
Oh.
act such and such. I'm like, that's not the compliment you think it is, uh, so there is a lot, there too, that I think it is getting better, but we're certainly not there yet.
Do you find that like people think of it as a bad label? Like you said, they think they're helping by saying you don't seem,
XYZ. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not, I think they're well intentioned, but it is not a good thing to say, spoiler alert doesn't help people feel better,
Yeah.
So it's not like I've seen comments saying like, if you comment on something, if they can't change it in 5 minutes, don't comment on it.
Mhm.
I try to live by that,
I like that.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah, I find that too when people I've known a lot of people over the years who have almost had to advocate for their own diagnosis, for their own,
Yeah.
I don't want to say label, although I guess in some ways that's what a diagnosis is, but that's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
always negative. Yeah. To
Mhm.
say, yeah, I am, and it's funny for some people, it's weird for them to have to advocate, to say, yeah, I am. I've worked with people with, even with like personality disorder who get labeled or judged, and they've had to push because people are like, well, you don't seem like it because
Yeah.
you're not a jerk or something like that, or whatever
Yeah.
the perception is. And they have to say, no, I am. And I know that you might judge me for it, but I'm going to push it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
Yeah. What is that? Now, I'd like to, if you don't mind, push on do you have other things to say about that? The identity of being an autistic woman. As you put it, a lot of people think that's a male diagnosis. Do you find that comes into other forms of discrimination? I mean, just being a woman in our society at all, probably. Right?
Yeah.
But then you add that.
Let me just bring out the list here. Let me go down.
Exactly.
Uh, but yeah, I have found that there is basically not much, if any, research on women with autism, and I think a big part in it, just in things in general, is the media. Like television and movies and things like that. When they have, autistic representation, a lot of it is, male focused or kind of based on stereotypes, things like that. And I do not think they do it with, ill intent. There's no harm. They think they're doing good, but, I think that does play a role in it. Because other people are, taking that in and thinking that's, if it looks like it here, it must look like it in everyone. And that's not the case.
Right. Sort of like, I know that the idea of someone with schizophrenia is, they're going to attack me because if that's brought up in a movie, right, then it's going to be that. I remember being a kid in some ways. Be weird if that was the end of that thought. Anyway, I remember we had this little, it might even have been a record, for crying out loud. So they'll age myself here. It was a Batman story. And I just remember, and it was Batman and Robin were trying to find the Joker, and they stumbled over like the couple dead bodies. So, this was for kids.
Yeah.
And at one point, Batman's saying like, well, I think that the Joker, it has paranoid schizophrenia, and perhaps a frontal lobotomy would help. And not knowing what that was at the time, I was like, okay. And that soaks in a little, right? And so there's those kinds of things. What do you find I'll throw this out there. I'm curious to see what you think about it. One of the diagnostic criteria that's always bothered me when it comes to autistic spectrum is that many times it is included that an individual with autism has little to no interest in social connection. And that's always
Mm,
bothered me because having known a lot of autistic people, and I don't like to paint with a broad brush, I have
yeah.
found that nearly 100%, not
Hmm.
maybe not 100, but
Yeah.
have extreme interest in actually depression and a hard time when they can't connect with people.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What are your thoughts about that? The desire for sociality.
Yeah. I think because we people who are autistic don't always express it in a neurotypical way, that neurotypical people will think, oh, they're just not interested or they don't care, et cetera, et cetera. And that is not the case at all. And I know, speaking from my experience, sometimes I'd avoid it, even though it's something I crave more than anything,
Mm-hmm.
because I was so afraid of, being rejected or, feeling ashamed because they might not understand my diagnoses and things like that. So, yeah, something I want more than anything, but, you know, it is rough for, I think, a lot of, can't speak for everybody, but I think for a lot of neurodiverse people, it is hard to kind of make those connections when there are things like stereotypes still floating in people's heads,
Mm-hmm.
and they might not always react well to
Yeah.
certain things. So,
What have you run into stereotype wise that people have?
mm, I do deal with like other personality disorders, kind of like similar to, schizophrenia and things like that. And I have, seen people say, better lock the knives,
Oh,
just like awful, awful stuff, you know. Um, and it's very hurtful. And I just think we need to really work on changing that
mhm.
mentality and,
Yeah. Holy cow.
seeing that through different lens.
You've run
Because
into that. Yeah. Have you run into that personally where people will say, oh, so when are you going to attack? I mean, I
yeah.
don't know if they say that. Do they say that?
They haven't said those words, but it's kind of, same vibe.
Oh, gee.
I've with like autism too, I've had people say, I don't think you're autistic because you're making really good eye contact. And it's like, I'm masking right now. I'm afraid to look away. It's like I'm trying to put on, so I'm like just prolonged eye contact kind of thing. And that's not,
Yeah.
a lot of stereotypes, a lot of stereotypes.
Well, and I think of it like it would be if someone said, you know how nearsighted people are,
Mm.
they love kung fu movies. I mean, to me, it's the same thing. If you were to say that, it, it's like that's how those people are, right?
Yeah.
And they all are. Oh, you don't make eye contact. That's what we expect, and so therefore, and it's nice of them to diagnose you. To re-diagnose
Right.
you as not autistic. It's like, oh, thank you, doctor. Wait, did I call you? I've never called you doctor before. Oh, because yeah, I get it. You're not one.
I saw a TikTok. I can't remember who it was by, but it was so funny. And they were responding to a comment saying, "Oh, he's not autistic." And it was a sister and brother. And the sister was like, "I think they got their medical degree, from Google, but congrats, you're not autistic."
If
And he's
that,
walking
right?
out the door, and he's like, "Thank God, I'm gonna go do normal people things, make eye contact and things like that." It was just so funny. It was like that's how it really looks. It's funny.
I,
Kind of like
and
the sad funny.
I,
Like you
I'm
have to laugh or you'll cry.
right. I imagine. I imagine that. Can you say more about masking? That's a very interesting term.
Yes. Masking is the persona of trying to act more neurotypical with neurotypical features to try and fit into social situations. A lot of people will mask, at school, at family events, at parties. And they'll do that by, forcing eye contact. They'll suppress stims, things like that to kind of, because they think if I show this, I will not be accepted. I will be, bullied, things like that. And I've seen, I can't say this 100%. I believe it's more common in women than it is in men. And I think that has to deal with, women getting diagnosed later in life as opposed to men. But yeah.
Yeah. I remember a study that I read or some information about women and heart attacks. And it said that women are more likely to die from a heart attack than a man.
Wow.
And one of the reasons is it kind of goes to exactly what you're saying. If you're having Thanksgiving dinner, grandma is more likely to be socialized in such a way that she's going to go, oh, I don't feel good. I'm going to lay down and maybe die. I mean, she might not say I'm going to go lay down and maybe die. But
whereas, it's been nice knowing you. Taking a one-way trip.
I'll just be upstairs dying. Don't mind me, but could someone check the yams? Especially if they got those mushrooms on top, marshmallows. That is a new recipe I just invented. Mushrooms on top. But grandpa typically is more likely to go, oh, I'm having a problem. Everyone, call somebody. So I think, that's a thing. And
oh yeah.
Well, and women's complaints are often not taken seriously by doctors.
Oh, not at all.
Yeah.
I've experienced that firsthand many times.
Yeah?
Unfortunately, it's a common story within a lot of women. So,
yeah, it's just gonna ask a little bit about a crazy theory of mine. So this one is not designed to piss people off. This one might. Guaranteed somebody listening is going to be annoyed by what I'm about to say. So one of the neurotypical things is the expectation that if something is due on the 5th, it's there by the 5th, right? And for many people, this can be almost, I'm gonna call it almost a form of discrimination. That's the part that's going to bother people. So especially when it's a huge deal. And I've worked a lot with people in my work, right, who have things. Some people have court things. That's a huge deal if you don't make the deadline. Work things, insurance, renewals, things like that. And one of the interesting things is those who tend to get distractibility or mood cycling or depression, it's like one of the things they'll do in school sometimes is alter due dates.
Yes, I had that in my school. Yeah.
Did you find that?
And that was so. I think without that, I probably would not have turned in any assignment. To be completely fair, because it took me a lot longer. Because I do deal with some learning disabilities in certain areas. I think without that, and I think there's also just this pressure when you have this certain due date that you have to get it by then and it has to be perfect by then. And you have to almost like overcompensating for certain things. And yeah, I can see how it could fall into kind of almost a discriminatory category there.
And that's my kind thought. There. And I'm gonna suggest gently that maybe those of you out there who are annoyed by that, if you are neurotypical, are you offended by my theory or do you feel like it's wrong because you have a neurotypical expectation? Because you're like, it's wrong to not turn it on time. Now, I'm going to be a little crummy and not suggest a fix. I'm not exactly sure what the fix would be, since, and that's what people will say probably is, how do we run society? But the fact is, how do we run society in high school? And as you just pointed out, there might be an accommodation made, right?
Yeah.
With that. And so, I don't know what, if that's as crazy as it sounds, that theory.
No, I can see that because I can see how they could think, kind of like how if you don't make eye contact, they find that's very rude. A lot of neurotypical people. So I think those kind of, fit in together is kind of this perception that cannot fit into every box,
Yeah. And I've known people who have held it against kids and grandkids. And when it's like, they didn't like to hug me when they were little and we didn't know why. And now we know why, but I still resent them. Now, I will say, luckily, I mean, most of the people I've met who have that are the reason they
Mhm.
tell me about it is because they're trying to get over it, right? And I
Yeah.
realize that that's their problem. It's
Yeah.
like I resent
Yeah.
it because of my hangups, right? That I
Hmm.
can't appreciate the medical situation or different thought situation with that. So I don't know. I welcome anybody's tweets about it at Break a Brain.
Yeah.
If they want to say, because I don't know, it's just maybe it's a half cocked theory of mine. But anyway, just a thought about how do we do that? I really liked your suggestion or the way that you structured your statement about do we add to society? We don't have to subtract all
Hmm.
the expectations and way it's built, but do we add inclusivity into that? And
Yeah.
I really like that theory, that idea,
Mhm.
you know, the sort
Thank
of
you.
thing. What kinds of things would you add if you're in charge? Let's say you're in charge of society tomorrow.
Ooh. Oh. Ah. A lot of pressure.
And by the way, in
Um,
this door number one here, I have the king and queen of society who are going to turn that over to you. No, just kidding.
I'm expecting their resignation in the
This
mail. No.
this is what you've won today on the Broken Brain. Didn't tell you it was a game show. No.
I think I would probably start with, I mean, I think the school systems have come a long way than they have even 10 years ago. But I think a lot of focus I would put would be in elementary, middle, and high school education, because that's where we learn not only just math and science and things, but we kind of learn how to deal with other social norms and how to deal with when people don't really accept us and things like that. And I think if there was more inclusivity there, then we might feel a lot more confident as adults entering the adult world.
Mhm.
So I think that's what I would do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. When you were in school, you mentioned accommodations.
Yeah.
Did you have like an IEP
Yeah,
or
I did.
or a 504 or whatever? People know the difference, but they're
Yeah.
basically accommodations. So,
Yeah, I had an IEP.
yeah. Was
Mhm.
that easy to get and maintain? Was it difficult? Did you find, I guess I'm going to assume that your parents, your guardians were involved in
Oh yeah.
that, initiating that, but um,
Yeah.
was it, what was that like having to work with that? Did you have any input in it or what was it like?
There was a little bit of input. I think most of it fell back on the teachers, like both in the like the math and science classrooms, and also I had like an adaptive like a resource classroom where I could go just to work on things and get extra help. So it was mostly between like those teachers and my mother and father and things like that. um, I would be there for it sometimes, but I don't think I had too much input in it. But I was pretty all right with how it turned out, so I'm not complaining. But
Yeah.
doesn't hurt to have more input of the person who you're talking about for sure.
That would be maybe a change.
Yeah,
And I should say a change for some places more than others because
yeah,
I think some are better than others at that. Some special ed departments, right?
yes, definitely.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting to me the way that works because I used to work in a college. It was a technical skills college mainly,
Mm.
and in this area as a counselor there. And one of the things is that I wasn't the primary counselor in charge of this, but I played a supportive role in um, making, evaluating, and approving accommodation requests. And we
Mhm,
were a small college, and we tended to be very, I think anyway, helpful when we would
mhm,
talk to people about what would help and where they could go to get assessments and updated things. But one of the things that was very interesting was, interestingly enough, the things that qualify for an IEP don't automatically qualify for accommodations in college.
mm,
As an adult, the other main difference that people weren't always ready for and no one told them about was that
mhm,
in the school, they are allowed and in some ways even encouraged to find, identify, help, and they're allowed to say to parents, "Hey, have you ever tested for this? Or have you, do you think that this is going on, or are there any diagnoses that would help?" They're allowed to ask that, right?
mhm,
Whereas in the adult system, they aren't. And so we had some people who
mhm.
came in like, "I'm really struggling. I wish someone would help me." I had somebody reach out to me maybe in school or whatever. and
Mhm.
we weren't legally allowed to say, "Hey, do you know we got a thing or something
Mm.
or whatever," because that would be considered, asking someone or trying to violate someone's federal privacy rights. You know
Mm.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And so we sort of had to wait till people asked. Um,
Mm.
and that was different. And there wasn't a lot of education about how to cope in the adult system and the college system, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, and there was quite a bit we could do, you know. We found that sometimes getting textbooks digitally, and the publishers they have to legally, but they will
Mm.
supply, and getting a digital copy sometimes allowed people to manipulate the colors,
Mm.
because apparently black print on a white background is a pretty common for people with sensory issues, can be
Mm.
pretty common to be difficult to read. I didn't, and I didn't know that till I worked there.
Yeah.
But so anyway, that was an interesting thing that was very different, for
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
to try to figure out. I'm very interested in this idea too that I have had and people have sometimes that, if we flash forward into the future, are we going to find that I'm always interested in what things my kids are going to say. I can't believe they thought this. I mean, I know
Yeah.
there's already that for the younger
Yeah.
generation, but we look back in time 2-3 generations and most of us are horrified by something.
Mhm.
I mean, go
Oh,
back
yeah.
far enough. It's not that many generations till the Civil War, right? And when people thought
Mhm.
about slavery, whether or not that was a good idea. Um, and so, in a couple generations, are people going to say, "I can't believe they thought this was a disorder with autism
Mm.
or ADHD"? Are they going to be more like, "Oh, maybe there's different ways people think, but is it?" The classification as a disorder. I'm curious what you think about that as someone with autism.
Mm. No, it's like almost yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of feel like the parts that are the yes again play into the neurotypical overview. I have trouble with bright lights and loud noises, and a lot of people who do not have who aren't neurodiverse do not, and so they might consider that a disorder because they there's more of them than us, it seems, and
Mm-hmm.
they kind of they say no, we don't react that way, so it must be a disorder because a lot of people I know don't react that way. And I think I'm wondering if that would change over the years, that perception of
Yeah.
a,
And,
what a disorder is.
and the idea of inclusivity, right? To
Mhm.
say, if you don't want to come to a party or a club, I'm just going with bright lights and loud noise. But there's
Yeah.
probably a lot of things. Do you find that does that preclude a lot of activities?
Yeah. I find like even just going to the grocery store can be
Oh, yeah.
really overwhelming sensory wise. And I've seen a few stores now that they say like from like 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., they'll like dim the lights and won't have any kind of music
Wow.
on so that people with, who are neurodiverse and struggle with that kind of sensory input can go and shop and be able to do it without all that. So I
That's
think we
pretty
are making
impressive.
progress, in the grand
Yeah.
scheme of things, but I think we still got a long ways to go.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's really interesting. And
Mhm.
you think about now that's an example of advocacy in education,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, which is one of the things you're involved in as you're building a podcast,
Yeah.
is now
I hope
advocacy
so.
in
I hope
education.
it's seen that way.
Yeah. And that's the hope,
Yeah.
is that it can be. That's fascinating to do that. One of the things that I hear people say, well, and I think this is a reason, but I don't know if it's a good reason, but classification of a disorder allows for insurance to pay for services to help.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, it does, because an insurance
Yeah.
company or Medicaid or Medicare or whatever, they're going to deny a claim for therapy if you just said someone's having a hard time. It's like, well, that's not a medical diagnosis, so we're not going to pay
Mm-hmm.
for it, which is their favorite thing to say. So
Yeah.
one of the things, but I also don't think that's a good reason, because if someone is suffering depression because they have, let's say, a fatigue kind of a condition. Now, they might be diagnosable with fatigue, but someone like me, if I put that on a claim form, they're going to deny it because I'm not a professional who deals with, the medical aspect of fatigue. But if there's a diagnostic code for depression or anxiety, that is related to a medical condition or caused by it, then they get treated. And so, or even if it's not, if it's just, hey, I'm depressed, and part of my depression has to do with the way I'm treated by people, it's like, well, okay, then they could be treated. So I just think there's a workaround for it if we were to look at it that way. I don't know. And I don't know the answer either, to things like that. It's interesting. So
it's tricky.
Yeah.
We've made it kind of tricky. Society.
Do you think there's a good dialogue? Where do you find that, where people talk about these things? Or do you find that there's a real dearth of that? Is that something that you don't find very often?
I've found it more like on platforms, such as TikTok. I've seen a lot of people, mostly my age, but I've seen people older and younger who are actively, talking about their diagnoses like autism, ADHD, even things like schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder. And so I think, so many people use that app and they'll scroll through the For You page and hopefully they'll land on one of those videos and it'll take them, let them kind of look at, maybe I should think about this kind of differently. Maybe I should view this differently. So I think it's like overall is still lacking, but I think we certainly are getting there.
Yeah. That's good. What kind of resources have you found for education? Do you find that people... you just mentioned a great one, which is TikTok. And that's something that's really growing. I was able to talk to some folks who do a podcast, Leah Lamont. Hang on. It's... just a second.
We need like the Jeopardy music, but like not copyrighted.
Yes. As I get shut down for that. I got to get the name of their podcast here, because I got to plug it. Yeah, the Lamont and Leah podcast. Lamont and apostrophe Leah podcast. See, I knew there was something there that people enter IN like a dummy on the search thing. Lamont and Leah, and they talk a lot about social media. And they use TikToks on there to say, here's something that's happening. So, it's an interesting thing to see, especially young people. I really love that about people of my kids' generation and a little in between them and me too.
Yeah.
But so it's really a good thing to see people being open and pushing for openness, I think.
Yes.
To say that's nothing to be worried about. And even if there's non-typical or neurotypical, if there's things that people do to cope and to deal with stress, then one thing that I have learned from autistic individuals that I've known, and I have some friends and I've met people, and I have some client people that I've worked with. Client people, that's what I call them. Yeah, you're a client person. Nice to meet you. But I know a therapist who's one of the best therapists I know also. That has nothing to do with her being autistic, but who knows? I could ask her, have her on the show. And as I've talked to people, one of the very interesting things I've learned is some of the strengths that come along with that. One thing, it's so funny as I've talked with people about neurotypical sociality and social behavior. One of the examples that comes up is people asking a question, and sometimes the question being interpreted literally. And once again, not everybody, but some people on the spectrum might hear someone say, hey, do you want to go see Dune, for example? And if they don't, they're more likely to say no. Whereas maybe someone neurotypical would understand the subtext of, I'm really asking, do you want to hang out with me? Right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting as I've talked to people about that, I've found myself saying, what they really mean is, do you want to spend time with me? Like a lie. No, it's not a lie, not a lie exactly, but it's kind of like, they're not being clear.
Reminds me of that John Mulaney bit. He's like, like a liar.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, how much of neurotypical communication do we take responsibility for the fact that someone who has neurotypical social behavior, maybe, is like depending on people to read into a great deal of subtext,
Yes.
right?
Oh yeah.
And it's annoying if you think about it. It doesn't make any sense. And it definitely doesn't make sense to judge other people for not picking up on it. So I don't know. That's something that I've seen that is held against people, right?
Yeah, I find it even like with my mom. I mean, God bless her, she's the best. But she'll like sometimes she'll do things and she'll be like, I bet you're really enjoying that TV show, aren't you? She's trying to take out the trash, and I'm like, oh yeah, I am. Thanks for checking in. That's nice. And she really means like, get off your butt and help me with this trash. So it's like, just say that first. It could save us so much time.
And is that read as disrespect potentially?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Oh, you mean sarcastic, huh? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Did you find that, were there any emotions that were easier to pick up on in other people, or subtext that's easier to pick up on for you personally? I mean,
I guess like any kind of sadness. I like to think I'm a pretty empathetic person, so I like to think I can kind of understand when someone's like, avoiding a topic. It might be, because they're sad about XYZ. But I find things like, sarcasm or things that are, have an element of humor to it, a lot of times go right over my head with subtext. So I think it's different for everybody.
Yeah. It's funny. I hear people talk about Drax from the Guardians of the Galaxy. If you're a Marvel fan, or even if you're not, people still talk about it. But I've heard people talk about that because he's very literal. And I've had a few people that I've met who've said, wow, he's like an autistic superhero. And when people identify with that, some people like it. And then some people hear that comparison and are annoyed by the comparison, I imagine, to it. For especially neurotypical people are great at being, white knight allies. If you run into that annoyance of people being like, I'm an ally of mental illness, and so let me make some judgments. No, let me speak in blanket statements. I don't know. But what do you think about stuff like that? Do you see representation in media that is positive? I mean, we talked about some of the negative,
I do. I have seen, and it's kind of odd because a lot of the representation I've seen has been in characters that are not confirmed to be autistic or neurodiverse. There's times where they're like, it's alluded to, like, I'm not sure if you know the show Community. Abed Nadir.
Absolutely.
And that show they allude to him being autistic all the time. And I've seen a lot of people say that they think he's a positive representation, even though it's not flat out said. He's an autistic character. And I agree with that too. I think he's pretty good representation. A lot of my friends kind of call me like the white Abed, and I'm like, I'm taking that as a compliment. White female Abed. I've seen it in other shows, like New Girl. Some people think Jessica Day is neurodiverse in some way.
I hadn't heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That fits.
Yeah.
In some way.
Yeah. And then of course there's like the common themes like Sheldon Cooper and things like that. But it is interesting that a lot of this positive representation is not flat out said, this is an autistic character. I find that interesting. And I still think we have a ways to go too, because there is a show called Everything is Going to Be Okay. And not sure if you've heard of it, but there's a character who is autistic. And her actress, Kayla Cromer, is an autistic individual in, real life. And she is the first ever autistic actor to play an autistic main character in a television series.
Okay.
And that debuted in 2020. So that's only like a year ago. So I think, we still have a ways to go. And it is a dream to be an actor and screenwriter and kind of help add to that, to, the positive representation where people can, actively have that and say, I feel a little bit better because I can see this character that I relate to so much is having this really cool life, or has these amazing friends, et cetera, et cetera. And I think television is a really good way to, do some activism. I think comedy, especially, because I think, comedy is a universal language. We all kind of relax, and it kind of addresses the elephant in the room for many things. And then once people can kind of realize that, I think they're more open to confronting ignorance and stereotypes and things like that. So
yeah, no, that's very powerful, and it is so amazing how people on the outside of an issue or the outside of something don't realize things like what you just said. It's 2020, and it's like,
yeah,
that's the first. That's the first.
yeah.
The first time someone thought about that,
I
and
know.
that's very interesting. So that's your career goal as well, as working in entertainment.
Yes,
Yeah,
very much so.
very
That's the
excellent.
big goal.
What are your thoughts on? Let's get another controversial thing, maybe.
Oh boy.
What are? But I'll set you up for it this time.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on a neurotypical person playing a atypical person or a neurodiverse person?
I've heard of this a lot, especially when, I'm not sure if you heard of the Sia movie music controversy.
Let's talk a little about that so people know.
Oh, that was a big deal. The musician Sia made a movie called Music about, I believe, 13-year-old girl who is nonverbal autistic. And they had her played by a totally neurotypical actor, Maddie Ziegler, who was known from Dance Moms. And she was doing a lot of playing on stereotypes, which was not the actor's intent. I think she was only 13 playing that. That must have been a hard thing. I hold no ill will towards her. It was not her fault, but she, made faces that were kind of like almost mocking of autistic traits and things like that. And so people who were autistic, confronted Sia on Twitter and said, this is not good representation for many reasons. Like, they showed restraint scenes where, like, in real life people have died from, and people were saying the biggest issue was that it was a neurotypical actor playing a neurodiverse role. And I remember one tweet said, like, there were so many autistic actors who could have filled that role.
Yeah.
That could have been, a good fit, and they say, I'm an autistic actor myself. I could have done this kind of role. And I think Sia had responded to their tweet and said, maybe you're just a bad actor. So
and that, I think, is the problem a lot of times, is the reaction. Let me double doon on being jerky about it, is what I see people do a lot of times. And that was an example. We hadn't delved into it, but when I had previous episode, Kristen Lopez, who's a film critic who is a disability advocate and writes about her own experience with disability as well as disability in film. She had mentioned that as an example of something that missed the mark, let's say.
Yeah.
And I would be interested, and I don't know if you know, because you might know, but I don't. If they even had consultants, like if they had autistic consultants on it. I know that some projects, like the Pixar short Loop, is one that was heavily, like, I know for sure that that they had consultants there, at least, who were working with the artists. But I don't know if they did.
They actually compared Loop. It's funny you mentioned that. They actually compared Loop to the music movie, because Sia said that she had found an autistic actor who was at the same, I hate saying functioning level, but I'm not kind of sure what else to say in the context to give it the right context. But as the character, and they said the environment was too stressful for her, so they cast Maddie Ziegler instead. And in Loop, there was a behind the scenes where the autistic character was voiced by a nonverbal autistic, I believe, teenager. And they said that they could tell that having her in the studio was really upsetting to her. So they brought all their equipment to her home and they recorded all of her, lines and things in her home where she would be more comfortable. Yeah. So they said, that's not really an excuse. There are ways to, to do this. But I think back to the topic of can a neurotypical person play a neurodiverse role? I think they can. I think there is, the autistic community does like to say nothing about us without us. So I think they can, but I think you need to have, autistic screenwriters or an autistic director or things like that, that are helping to give that, a real element to it. So it's not all based on, what their interpretation of neurodiverse people are.
Yeah.
So I think you need a combination of one or the other to really make it work. But
I think that makes tons of sense. And particularly as people are more open and available and there is inclusion. I mean, that's one of the things that bugs me when people talk about any form, whether it's racial, neurodiverse, sexual orientation. When people talk about inclusion and diversity, a lot of people say things like that, like, well, why wouldn't, so you're going to cut someone out just because, what if they're the best actor? And you can tell what I think of that, I guess, by the voice that I was doing for that person.
I've seen that too.
And I think one of the reasons that falls flat is even if you use that to give a pass to people in the past, which I'm not a big fan of that either. But even if you do, and maybe there's something to be said for in the past they didn't have the knowledge and whatever, they weren't as sensitive. There weren't opportunities as much back then, which is another, it's bad that there weren't.
Yeah.
But nowadays, we don't have that excuse. It's not like we don't have any actors with autism, that you can go out there and find. And getting that, and especially without consultation too, there's really no excuse for that. Right.
Yeah.
And so the days of having an excuse for that, if they ever existed at all, are over.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
You remind me as you say that of an incident, well, a curious incident, because that's the title of the work. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. It was a novel.
I remember that. We had to read that for school. Yeah.
Oh, see, I want to know too, because my experience having, once again, worked with different people on the spectrum and known people was that I saw the play also, and I found them both to be enjoyable. I found them both to be quite good storytelling. The book for me helped me get some feeling of relating to the character of wow, this person's going through seeing the world and being treated this way, and they're neurodiverse. And I thought it was good. The play I really enjoyed, but it did cross my mind that the actor, but I don't know if he's neurotypical or not. That wasn't in his bio in the program, but he definitely leaned into it, right? And I felt like some of the mannerisms that he portrayed got a laugh from the audience, and were meant to, right? And so I found mixed feelings there. So that's my thoughts. I mean, what did you think about that book?
I have not seen the play. I think there's a movie too. If I
am recalling that
correctly,
cool.
I believe there is. Maybe. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that. But I thought, just from the book, I thought the author did a very good job of letting us see things from the main character's perspective to get us that kind of it's been a long time since I've read it, but from what I remember, it wasn't the view of other people dealing with this character. It was this character dealing with other people and the world around him.
Yeah.
So I thought the book was good.
Good.
I think I could be wrong on this too. I think they had just come out, some actor was the first autistic actor to play the main character's role in the play. I think kind of recently, within the last couple of years or so. So, yeah.
I'm cycling through every piece of media that I know I don't know if this is annoying or not, so shut me
No,
down
I
if
love
it is.
it. It's one of my special interests. It's what I
Yeah.
want to get into, so I can talk about it till the cows come home.
There is a novel, and I'm pulling up Goodreads now to make sure that I know. I think this is right. Yeah, The Speed of Dark by Elizabeth Moon. And it's a sci-fi that takes place in the near future. So just enough to have whatever technology you want to exist,
Yeah.
but still a little bit grounded. That's a writing technique. Not bad, not a bad writing technique, and very well written. The main character has autism. I believe it's identified, if I remember correctly, and also has a social group of people who do but the one of the main thrusts of it is that he has a desire to be an astronaut, and it's questionable whether or not he'd be allowed to or whatever. He has some serious, I guess, setbacks of what he is considered to be capable of, but yet genius level with math, because of course you have to have a superpower if you have.
Yeah.
And maybe that's another thing we should talk about. You run into that. That's the Rain Man phenomenon, right? It's
Yeah.
like I should be able to throw matchsticks in the air, and you'll know
Right.
how many they are and divide them and tell me all the state capitals, and right.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
got to be offensive.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of people, I'm in some autistic support groups, who say that they'll be made to feel badly when they can't do X, Y, Z, when they don't have this quote unquote superpower, because they kind of feel like inferior.
Yeah.
And that they're not good enough. And that's not the case at all. We all bring something to the table. It just differs for each person of what,
Well, yeah. I mean, you think it's so shitty to treat someone that way,
Yeah.
right? And
I know.
Like, boy, you don't have a special ability. What good is it even being autistic? You should,
Yeah.
you should give it up. Just, that's, yeah. So what, but with this, there's, in The Speed of Dark in the novel, and I'm going to spoil it. If you're okay, you can plug your ears, and whoever's listening, hit that 15-second skip button a couple times or something. Or just do that whenever I talk. They should just hit that and then hear what you have to say. But I think that's how a lot of people listen to the show. So the part of the issue is that medical science in the near future has come up with a way to cure genetic conditions, right? And one of the things is, so he has the option of curing, let's say, air quoting, of becoming non-autistic, right? And so here's the spoiler. He does in the end. And it seems like it seemed to me like that threw off the novel for me. To be a lower rating on Goodreads. So take that, Elizabeth Moon. She's watching my review. Very good novel in other ways, but it was like, wow, that's, I felt uncomfortable with that being out there saying, would I get rid of it? I know X-Men flirted with this in one of the X-Men movies with mutation and superpowers. But I don't know what your thought is. Once again, yeah, this is me. I'm gonna name culture and be like, you piece of culture, tell me what you think. Speak for everyone. No.
No pressure. But
exactly.
Yeah, I feel like there would be a way to do that if he did accept it and then realize it held no real positive things for him, that, he still could have done XYZ with that autism diagnosis. Yeah. It might have taken longer. It might have had to, go a different way around it to achieve it, but he could have achieved it. And so if he realized, this wasn't the correct answer, I was okay. Yeah. But I think just to say, take that, it kind of, other people who are autistic could read that and think, wow, is this what people think, that it's something that needs a cure, and how that can affect relationships with other people. Yeah. And I just think it's not good in general, because we need, some adaptive treatment and things, sure, but we do not need a cure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, this has been super fascinating, and I'm really grateful for you coming on. I'm really looking forward.
Thank you for having me again.
Oh no, yeah, you're welcome. I mean, anytime. you're welcome. People know that I tend to make cool people recurring guests on the show. And by the
I'm
way,
cool.
by the way, that is not a mess. If anybody out there has been on the show once, that is not to say that you're not cool. Some
You're
people
like,
are,
wait a second.
people are just busy. But
I can hear like the angry typing as we speak. A lot of angry emails coming your way.
especially the following. We'll give a little list of names at the end. No, but I'm really looking forward to How Neurotypical, or whatever you call it, coming out. Is there? I want you to be able to plug that and talk about some of your contact information for people. First, though, as I like to ask everybody, is there a charity or community service oriented dealie that you would recommend to people? And it absolutely does not have. It doesn't have to do with anything we're talking about. It can, but it doesn't have to. What are your thoughts there?
I've heard NAMI overall does good work.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had any personal experience with them, but I've heard good things. Would not really recommend Autism Speaks for a charity.
We didn't get into that. We didn't get into that, but I've heard bad things.
Yeah, they had in a commercial back. It was a while ago, 90s, I think. And they said autism works faster than like AIDS, cancer, and diabetes combined, or something like that, and that it'll ruin your marriage. And it was like, oh,
whoa,
yeah, something along the lines of that. You could find it on YouTube. It's crazy to watch and be like, well.
Once again, and once again, there's no excuse for that, especially if you're an organization that claims to be working with people. Like, was no one in the room?
I know.
No one with autism was in the room, And I'll put this out there because I doubt he listens. I did talk to someone once in a pre-interview kind of who wanted to come on to talk about ostensibly education. And just the way they talked about autism was super negative. And they were also saying vaccines caused it. And it just felt reckless and irresponsible of a message for me personally. And so we decided not to pursue that. Yeah. I'll just say I won't give details.
Well, thank you for that, because thank you for not giving the platform, like your platform, to someone who could, bring about negative things, even if they don't necessarily think they are. So
no, I
appreciate that.
Thank you for that. I am great. I'm glad or grateful for that. Thank you. Yeah, so that's, and once again, there's just not an excuse for it because resources are available. The therapist I talked about a minute ago, Candace Christiansen is her name. She practices here in Utah, but she does a lot of online stuff. So I'll throw that out there. She does workshops. Her husband is neurotypical, and so they will do workshops together about having a relationship. Someone on the autism spectrum and someone who's neurotypical, and it's not that there's not struggles, but they're very overcomable. And like that's one example of resources that are out there to say, just the same as you might work with anything in your marriage. There's just some tips from people who know, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So for NAMI. And, that one comes up a lot. I don't say a lot, but it has come up on the show when we talk about charities. And I agree, from what I have come across, a lot of good services for a lot of reasons. And no on Autism Speaks. I'm with you on that. From what I know, from what I have been told. And let me say this, everything negative I've been told about it has come from someone I know who is autistic. So I pretty much, I that holds water for me.
Yeah.
So tell everybody a little bit about the show, if anything you want to say about the formation of that and what you are doing and how they can contact you if you want them to. Your home address. Sure. Most people give a home address. No. Just kidding.
It's one. No. But it's working title, but I'm thinking I'll keep it, the How Neurotypical, and it's striving to be a comedy podcast. Because I've seen a lot of podcasts that, do raise awareness, but they're not, comedic in any way. And I understand that they think it needs like a serious tone. And, but I think comedy is again, like I was saying previously, a really good way to get, lessons across and kind of get people to put their guard down in order to accept them.
Yeah.
Those different viewpoints of things. So
that's really cool.
Comedy podcast. Yeah, thank you. With myself, who's neurodiverse, and some host somewhere out there who's neurotypical, and to discuss topics in a comedic way, kind of like what we were doing today, things like even just like first dates, how they would look from a neurotypical lens, and how they would look, just speaking from myself, I couldn't speak for everyone who's neurodiverse, of course, but the goal would be to have other neurodiverse people listen and kind of be able to laugh and get some relief and say, I feel seen in this. Mm-hmm. And for neurotypical people to listen and say, maybe this is, maybe could change their perspectives or, add on to.
Yeah.
So
that's great. And I know that one of the things you were talking about in that group on Facebook was looking for someone. I don't know if you're announcing tryouts here on the show. Or maybe you're already doing targeted interviews with people for co-hosting. So I'll just put that out there in the universe and see. Do you have a way in which people can follow you for now to learn more? And let me say this: I hope that when the show comes out, you'll let me know. In fact, we can even, we want to play a little plug, or if you have a commercial for it or something, we'll have that on here. I'll let people know when it's out. But is there a place they can follow you? Do you Twitter? Do you TikTok? Do you Insta?
Yeah, I have Instagram. It's Sydsvary, which SYDSVRY, which it was the handle was created when I was hyperfixated on Heathers.
Did you say VRY at the beginning?
Yeah, so mine is SYDS and then VERY.
VERY, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So, yeah.
Well, that's great to know, because people should follow you there. Everyone, go there right now. Follow. Don't forget. Pull over if you're in a car.
Please.
The next stoplight, hit Instagram and do that. Really grateful once again. Thank you. And
thank you again.
Good luck with forming the show. It's going to be great.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Court Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court Arts shows, visit courtemparts.com.